Well, here we are again. Another shooting. And I just got this information. So apparently there was a shooting by a 23-year-old man in Minnesota against a bunch of helpless children. And this man shot through the windows using legally bought and owned firearms. So your background checks aren't working there, lefties. I mean, let's just call a spade here. If personnel are getting firearms legally and then they use those firearms nefariously, and they had the background check to make sure that they weren't a prohibited person, and they still use the firearms nefariously, what does that tell you? It should tell you that you have to be your own first responder. After all the systems are put in place to protect you and your loved ones, you should be your own first responder. Now, with the school shooting, I think it was a church actually, with the shooting, there's been several of those over the years, and if you are an organization, if you are a church, a school, if you even run a business that's open to the public, any of those things where people are coming on your property, your premises, they're congregating, they're gathering, you have the moral responsibility to provide security to those people. I'm going to say that again. If you run a place that is open to the public and people gather in your area, you have the moral responsibility to protect those people. Which means you should hire security guards. Which means you should get threat vulnerability assessments on your premises. And if you don't know what that is, a threat vulnerability assessment can be done for your business, establishment, organization, whatever it is, pretty easily. And that threat vulnerability assessment will give you an idea on how to make your security measures better for your organization. This guy that shot into the church and shot those innocent children, who I believe, if I remember correctly from the news articles, the guy used to be a student there, or used to go there, used to congregate there, whatever it is. So he had some insider knowledge on how it works. This establishment, I can't remember if it's school or church or whatever, I would go out on a limb here and say that they probably did not do a threat vulnerability assessment. They probably didn't hire someone who can think like a criminal, can think like somebody who's going to do harm, and sit there and go, okay, well, this is how you're going to protect your organization. This is how you're going to protect your establishment. This is how you're going to protect children. I guarantee you that never happened with that establishment. So what's going to happen then? Are we going to learn from our lesson? Are we going to learn a lesson from this tragedy, or are we going to continue doing the same thing over and over? Are we going to continue doing the same thing over and over in the way of the left is going to tout, hey, look, see, we don't need guns, etc., etc. I guarantee you that's what's happening right now. They're using this tragedy to push more gun control. Those talks are happening. Here's the thing, though. That always happens. Every time there's a tragedy, politicians and all the other ones that don't like guns and don't like the Second Amendment, they're going to push gun control. They're going to use that tragedy to push gun control. But what they're not going to push is to provide more funding for security. They're not going to push training, actual training for individuals for security. They're not going to push that. They're not going to push putting law enforcement officers or putting or getting more law enforcement officers or providing more pay for law enforcement officers. They're not going to do that. They're going to push the gun control agenda like they always do. And for you businesses and organizations out there, if you don't think you need security, this should be a wake-up call to you. If you have an organization or a business or something like that, a brick and mortar place that you run, you manage, you have a moral responsibility to keep those persons safe that come on your property. That doesn't mean you should prevent firearms from coming on your property. That doesn't mean that. What it means is that you should have, not only should have cameras, of course, but cameras are always good after the fact, not during the event. You should have some kind of security guard. That security guard should be armed and well trained, and no, they don't necessarily have to be open carrying either. They can be concealed carrying. They can just be somebody that's hired to be there for a couple hours a day, and then another person can come, or whatever the case may be. Organizations, especially churches, need to have security. It's bottom line. If you don't have security and you're a church, you are wrong. If you don't have armed security, I believe, me personally, 100%, hands down, you're wrong. You have a moral obligation, a moral duty, a responsibility to keep those people safe. And if you're a security guard and you sign up for the job, you have a moral obligation to stand in front of the bad guy and be a bullet sponge if you have to, because that's what you signed up for, to protect other people. At a minimum, every organization out there needs to have a threat vulnerability assessment done, and then that threat vulnerability assessment will provide suggestions to the organization to make it more robust, to make security more robust. Think of it like this. When you buy a house, you get an inspection done on a house. In the inspection, there's going to be things that should be fixed and things that have to be fixed in order for, let's say, an FHA loan or VA loan or something like that to be established. Okay? Well, this is the same kind of thing. It's basically an inspection of your security measures within that organization or that establishment. And if you're not getting a threat vulnerability assessment done at a very bare minimum for your place of, whatever business, organization, whatever you call it, some kind of place where the public can gather, again, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. You have an obligation to keep people safe if you are running a brick and mortar business. I 100% believe that. And when it comes to the government, if you are a government school, a government entity, and you aren't pushing for more money to hire security guards, armed security guards for your schools, well, you're wrong too. If you're a principal out there in one of these schools, if you are a dean or whatever the head person is for the churches, okay, if you aren't pushing for armed security in your establishments, you're wrong. We protect our money with guns. We protect people with firearms. Nefarious people with that, right? I mean, how many times have you seen some kind of political figure or something of that nature, some kind of criminal that did something pretty damn heinous, and what do? We throw a bulletproof vest on him, and then he's surrounded by people with guns. But we don't protect our children with guns. Yeah, so I think we're completely ass backwards on the way we view security, firearms, awareness. We live in a great country where typically most places you're going to be safe, and then every single news article out there or news channel out there that where there's a shooting, somebody says in there, well, I didn't think this would happen in my neighborhood. It's a safe neighborhood, or whatever the case may be. It's the same stuff, right? It's like, well, yeah, because you didn't think. We don't know every single neighbor, and even if we did know every single neighbor, do we know their situation inside of their home? Do we know what's up here? No. The answer is no, obviously. And now security guards and security measures and TVAs and all that stuff, that's not the end all be all. You still have to have some situational awareness about you. Whenever you go out, you should say to yourself, literally, I'm not a bad person, but I know there's people out there that would likely do me harm if they had a chance. Whether it be for no reason or for my wallet or for, whatever. It doesn't matter. There's somebody out there that will harm you for no reason. Which is why you need to have situational awareness. You need to be trained. You need to know what to do and know what an imminent threat is. This is just, if you're just joining, this is just my lecture on the lack of care when it comes to organizations. We're talking about schools, churches, businesses, and the like. And it's pretty disheartening. Security is always an afterthought after a tragedy. And it shouldn't be an afterthought. It should be the first thing on your mind. If you have a brick and mortar, like I said, some kind of school establishment, some kind of church, business, something like that, you should at minimum get a threat vulnerability assessment at a minimum, and probably go ahead and get armed security. That's going to be roving security, right? They can't just be static. It can't be some freaking, I was going to say, it can't be somebody who doesn't look the part. Let me put it that way. Okay? Some person with like clothes hanging off of them and they don't look professional or anything of that nature. You have to get this done, America. You have to, because The alternative is anti-gunners getting their way of disarmament. That's the alternative. And that's not a good alternative because it wouldn't work. There's still going to be violence, no matter what. If you took all the guns out today, if you got it all out today, if you even added more background checks and all that stuff, you're still going to have violence, which means you still have to have situation awareness, which means you still have to get the threat vulnerability assessments, which means you still have to do your due diligence to keep yourself and to keep everyone safe that's in your area or in your purview. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I gotta go.